everybody, and I can't say happy Anzac Day, can I? It is Anzac Day 2023, and for many, hopefully all Australians, a very significant and important, sacred day. In fact, before I do anything else, I found this that I bought at auction. I don't think anyone else actually competed for it. Pete, you'll tell me if I'm holding it up sufficiently.
Yeah, that's good.
This is a collection of Rising Sun badges, Australian Rising Sun, Australian Military Forces badges. I always thought the Rising Sun was the Rising Sun. But no, it's had various incarnations and redesigns and rebirths and reinventions, rediscoveries. It's quite amazing. I don't know what I paid for it. I would have thought, well, you'd pay anything for that, wouldn't you? Just look at it. Just amazing, particularly on a day like today. You look at something like that and the people who've served and suffered under that badge, by golly. And you know what they've done that for? They've fought for our freedom. Your freedom and my freedom. So I can sit here and say what I like, even though those people are becoming more and more vocal, you know, the ones who want to shut us up, the woke ones. Well, a lot of young men and women fought and died for our right to speak. We must never forget that. And I think it was something like $15 or something. It was an Australia Post promotion, I gather. A collector's item. I love it. I value that immensely. Now, before we get into the stuff of the day, I'll just look at some of the anniversaries. The most important one, of course, is 1915, the first landing on Gallipoli Peninsula by Anzac forces during World War I. Terrible. I've not been there, but people who have been there look in awe at that beach and that cliff and think, how? Who in his right mind would have sent people to scale that? No one in his right mind would invade a country from that position. But I'm not a military person. It happened anyway, it's history. April the 25th. What else? 1684, going back a bit further, a patent was granted for the thimble. The thimble. You put a little thimble on your finger, which when you're doing the sewing, prevents the needle. Simple idea. Nobody's ever improved it. It's been around, the thimble, since 1684. Anyway, France performs a nuclear test on Mururoa Atoll, 1983. I still wonder why they didn't do it somewhere in France. 1995, Ginger Rogers, the American vaudeville stage, screen dancer, singer, top hat, so many movies, with, of course, people like Fred Astaire. Academy Award-winning actress. She dies at 83 in 1995. Microsoft becomes the third US firm to be listed with a market worth in excess of $1 trillion. But only Microsoft came along after Apple and Amazon got that accolade. $1 trillion, capital value, golly. Al Pacino, American actor. Justice for All, The Godfather, Serpico. He was born in New York City, 1940. Was he in, Pete, did you ever see Scent of a Woman?
Yeah, well, yes.
Was he in that?
I honestly can't remember.
I think he was. And he drove a Ferrari. He was blind, played the part of a blind man. And he drove a Ferrari totally blind.
Yes, he was in it. Yes, he was.
Yeah. The Scent of a Woman. 1985, West German Parliament rules that it's illegal to deny the Holocaust. Marconi, the Italian inventor and electrical engineer who pioneered work on long-distance radio transmission, Nobel Prize winner, 1909, born in Bologna, in Italy, in 1874. Happy birthday to Marconi. Daniel Defoe, I mentioned his birthday the other day. This was the day in 1719 that he publishes Robinson Crusoe, regarded, it says here, as the first English novel. I would have thought there were lots of novels before that, Dickens and others, but I don't know. 1719, first English novel. Bell Labs announced its first solar battery made from silicon. It had 6% efficiency, but mind you, it was back in 1954. You see, all this stuff about electric cars and stuff has been going on for a long, long time. Andreas Celsius, the Swedish astronomer, he proposed the Celsius temperature scale. He dies at 42. The year was 1744. New York becomes the first state requiring automobile license plates, for which there was a $1 fee. That was in 1901. Twitter announces a deal to sell itself to Elon Musk for $44 billion. And I think they are still laughing. All the way to the bank that they used to go to, but they bought instead. It's their bank. Russia elects Boris Yeltsin leader. In 1993, on the same day, different year, 2007, Boris Yeltsin's funeral, the first to be sanctioned by the Russian Orthodox Church for a head of state since the funeral of Tsar Alexander III in 1894. Boris was a bit of a rascal, a complete, absolute drunk. Did you ever see some of the stuff that with Boris Yeltsin stumbling around the place? Well, if you're a Russian leader, you don't really get too much criticism at home. And, Gladys Presley, mother of Elvis, born in Memphis, Tennessee, died in 1958, born this day in 1912. Anyway, happy day. Day of significance, Remembrance Day, Anzac Day. Pete, you'd be happy that the Crows won on the weekend?
Of course.
What was that, only one goal or something?
Oh, so it was,
I noticed it because...
A thriller, yes.
A thriller. Now, you would have heard that they have discovered the Montevideo Maru. Now, this is a World War II Japanese transport ship, 4 kilometres down, apparently, near the Philippines. Over 1,000 men and women and children lost, and importantly, of course, 979 Australian prisoners of war. That's a greater loss of Australian life than occurred in the entire Vietnam War. It was also the worst maritime disaster in Australia's history. I didn't know that. The ship was torpedoed by an American submarine, 2 torpedoes. There was no indication that it was carrying civilians and prisoners of war. And the Japs, of course, would regularly attack Allied hospital ships, mind you, emblazoned with the internationally recognized and respected Red Cross. Now, I don't believe that the Americans would have sunk that ship had they known it was carrying civilians and prisoners of war to China. Going to China as a prisoner of war, that would be kind of like a living death in itself, sadly. And that happened just a couple of days before, when I say a couple of days, I mean the discovery of the ship, a couple of days before Anzac Day. I worry about this thing called war, the pain and the suffering and the cost borne in the most bloody way, of course, by the young. It doesn't matter how far back we go. It seems that at one time or another, everyone has been at war with everyone. And I don't know what in the long term it's ever proven. We all go to war with idealism and patriotism. Off we go, and we fight these wars. We win, God willing. God willing we win. And then, of course, pragmatism and politics sets in. Yesterday's enemy is today's best friend and significant trading partner. Now, I'm sorry if that sounds cynical. This is probably not the day to point it out. But I am reminded of that, I think it was a Pete Seeger song. Pete, you'd remember. Pete Seeger's Where Have All the Flowers Gone?
Yeah, I remember the song. Yes, I think it was Pete Seeger.
Peter, Paul and Mary?
Peter, Paul and Mary sang it, yes. Yeah. Lots of people have had a go. The Weavers, I think, did a lovely version of it. Where have all the flowers gone? Gone to soldiers, every one. And then there was the Bob Dylan song, which was With God on Our Side, because everyone goes to war thinking God's on his side. Now, I don't know what we do about war. Politicians take us there. And there are diplomats. And, of course, there are money makers. I mean, lots of money in bullets and bandages. Again, not the day to talk about this in a cynical way. I cannot count the number of relatives of mine who've served and died for this country, including my own father, which is probably why I sit here day after day and say the sort of things that I say, because I can, and I'm grateful. A lot of people, as I said at the beginning of the segment, fought and died for the freedom and privilege that we enjoy in Australia. And to hear all those sort of woke lefties and political correct exponents, fools, working to destroy our nation and our freedoms, these freedoms, you know what I mean. You can't say that, you can't say this. It almost brings me to tears. Well, you can say that. A lot of people died so that we could say that. Most important. So don't listen to them. Don't let them shut us up. They're arguing about all sorts of things. Strangest thing, of course, is gender. Nothing to worry about. God decided that we were going to be one gender or the other when we were conceived. Now, I was in a pub the other day, and the owner was musing about the signs, the his and hers, boys and girls, hens and roosters, does and bucks, all the euphemisms for girls and boys. He's contemplating putting up a sign, he tells me, which simply says, "You sort it out," which would make for a very interesting, if not confusing, situation. And all of this because, according to the last census, you can look it up, 1,260 people ticked the box, transgender. Now, if we go to war again, I wonder just who the enemy's going to be, or who should be. Well, we've got to win. We've got to win this one. How about we go to war on woke? I can tell you, Pete and I will be oiling up. Well, I don't know. I've got an old 303. If we have to go to war,
Yes, well,
and you've got a M1 carbine.
well, that's only an air rifle, Jerry.
Well, you and I know that, but they don't. They can die of fright.
No, I've got a Winchester, that's all right.
But you got a Winchester, right? Okay. Anyway, let's hope it doesn't come to that. I hope good sense, intelligence, we can talk them out of it. Labor's decision to drastically change military expenditure, this is this strategic military review, which you might have heard about in the last couple of days. It's interesting, and it's also a little worrying. Reprioritising, I think they said. No. Realigning. Yeah. Realigning. What are the priorities of this government, I wonder? They can't do everything. The NDIS and the crooks who are milking it, the consultants, the voice, more and more bureaucrats, now New Zealanders, to whom John Howard specifically denied welfare. More than 670,000 of them. Now, I've got nothing against New Zealanders, but 670,000, that's 15% of the New Zealand population, by the way. They are here. The largest New Zealand suburb in the world is Bondi in Sydney. Did you know that? Or maybe somebody was pulling my leg. Well, now they're up for the full Monty. Free education, free health, all the benefits. And by the way, I don't mean free, because nothing is free. The Australian taxpayer provides everything, and he and she do not need this. We all pay for it, not Anthony Albanese. And before you start thinking and talking, you know, the unique relationship between our two countries, Anzac Day, yes, I know, and again, it's probably not the day to bring it up. But let me point out that there are less than 70,000 Australians over there, and hundreds of thousands of them over here. The imbalance is only going to get worse. John Howard knew that reciprocal welfare arrangements would be a disaster. And ours, of course, is much more generous than theirs. Sugar on the table, irresistible. But does this government care? It doesn't look to me like they care. It's just another cost to bear. And I heard another argument too, which we'll talk about maybe later in the week. All of these people, be he the head of the Reserve Bank or the head of this department or that department, you know, they're all on millions of dollars a year. And the suggestion, Tony Denton suggested, and I think it's a great idea, no head of a public service department should be paid more than the Prime Minister. I think that sounds perfectly reasonable. We don't need to pay them all that money. But just going back to this strategic military review for a second, some contracts for the supply of equipment are going to be cancelled, apparently. I'd have to ask at what cost? Can't just go around cancelling contracts. So we'll cancel those and we're going to sign up for more long-range missiles. Fine. Well, what about cyber warfare? It's clear to me that we can be hacked into submission in just a few days. I don't mean with a bayonet or a hatchet, I mean with a computer. We have the submarines coming, yep, somewhere down the track. Probably the best small air force in the world. But do we have the personnel to make everything work? We tend to use our fighting men and women to do all sorts of things, but fight, you know, floods and bushfires and pandemics and guarding quarantine stations. I wonder how many armies like to be treated like the National Guard or the Civil Defence. I don't know. You might have an opinion on that. I'm no expert, but perhaps our emphasis should be on high-tech cyber defence and attack. And of course, bright young men and women who will outthink the world. I remember a great Winston Churchill speech in which he said, "The empires of the future will be the empires of the mind." Now, I think that's perfectly true. Perfectly true. We recorded yesterday's show, Monday's show, so I couldn't comment before now on the death of the great Barry Humphries. We mentioned that he was gravely ill last week, and sadly on the weekend, at 89, he died. When you break your hip at that age, it hardly ever turns out well. But we lost a good one there, ladies and gentlemen. I loved him dearly. I loved the way he took the mickey out of the woke nonsense, the political correctness and all the lefty nonsense. I thought that he would pull through, but he didn't, sadly. A totally original man, a comic genius, and he made it look so easy, effortless, razor-sharp wit, and even towards the end, as quick as ever. He would always come and see me at the radio station when he came to town, but not before he'd visited one of his two favourite bookshops, old bookshops, antiquarian bookshops. You know, he had tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of books, and I have no doubt he read them all. He absolutely adored going into the 5DN record library. He'd spend hours in there. I could never bring myself to tell him in later years that when the station went FM rock, they threw the library, the record library, in a dumpster, disposed of it. We all have our favourite Barry Humphries stories, and you've probably heard a few in the last couple of days. I always remember that if you went to an evening with Dame Edna, or one of his other characters, you never came late. Because if you did, you would be singled out and tortured publicly and hilariously for the next 2.5 hours. And I always remember that famous appearance by Sir Les Patterson, cultural attaché, on J. Walton's Touch of Elegance. Now, that was the daytime TV show on Channel 10 here in Adelaide. And Sir Les, there he was, dribbling and blotchy, flirting outrageously with Jay. This was live television. Live television. And Sir Les was out of control, as he very often was. He had... I don't know how to describe this. Did you ever see this? He had some sort of motorised mechanical dildo stuffed down his pants. Here was this thing jumping around in his pants in full view of the audience. And now, the way they produced the show was with one camera, just one camera. So there was no cutting away from the action. Nowhere to go. If you didn't see it, you missed one of the funniest moments on TV. After that, I think Barry was, well, actually not Barry so much as Sir Les, was banned from live television for years and years and years. And there was, I think it might have even been the same day, because they had a cooking demonstration, and he went up to the table of all this neatly prepared, beautifully presented food, and he was stuffing it in his ears, up his nose. And of course the poor presenters didn't know what to do. It was live television. You had to pretend it was okay. Just wonderful. Look, you probably could find that somewhere, maybe on YouTube, minus the bit with the dildo, I know. I hope Australia finds a way to suitably pay tribute to the great Barry Humphries. I'll leave you with that. Enjoy what's left of the day, and remember all of the people who suffered, died, fought, struggled, so that we could be here, in fact, today. Believe in yourself. I'm Jeremy Cordo. Pete and I will be back tomorrow. Thanks for viewing The Court of Public Opinion.